Is AI actually replacing developers? After 2022, when tech hiring boomed and then cooled off, it's a question on everyone's mind. But what's actually happening? I decided to dig in. If you want to know what to expect, stick around. Now, first thing first, I want to say a few things about our history. In the past, recent and not very recent, there were quite a few occasions when people expected software development to die and absolutely not recover. So let's take a look at a few occasions. In 1957, when Fortran was invented, it became so easy to do programming that the community back in the day called it heresy, because now it was all of a sudden super easy to write code instead of tingling tubes and converting everything in ones and zeros. That scared people and even caused a movement against it, but then, as expected, was adopted and sped up the development process. People learned new technology and moved on. By the way, Fortran was marketed as a programmer killing thing. Kinda sounds like VibeCoding, eh? Biggest slogan of AI right now. In the aftermath, Fortran didn't kill anything. It actually created an explosion in jobs and hiring. In 1959, COBOL was introduced, which stands for Common Business Oriented Logic. Basically, it used actual English words like add, multiply, or move, and was marketed the same as Fortran, as a tool to replace programmers who cost a lot and are very niche specific, so businessmen can write code themselves and be happy. Well, turned out business people didn't want to write code 8 hours a day, but they still needed programmers. And again, the code bases and code in general exploded. Since it was easier to write and read, everything grew 100 times larger. Here are some fun facts. 95% of ATM swipes still rely on COBOL, and 80% of personal credit card transactions depends on it. That's impressive, huh? Now let's take a look at the 80s and the introduction of case tools. That's the computer-aided software engineering. Basically, the idea was simple. A person, usually a business analyst, or a manager, they would sit down and draw sort of a flow chart or a diagram and then click a button. So the machine then would compile that picture into thousands of lines of code, and you get the drill already. Junior devs were told their role and skills are obsolete because it's a machine and the machine can turn a picture in a database query, so who need human to know SQL? Long story short, diagrams became unmaintainable very quickly. It turned out that it's easier to maintain 100,000 lines of code instead of 1,000 diagrams for a bank account. And another problem was that if something breaks, you still need a person to fix it. It's very similar to vibe coding. And there were many more occasions. The dot-com crash, the low-code movement, the outsourcing boom, you name it. But every time and every event was digested with the system and entailed with significant beneficial outcomes. The job market grew, the revenue grew, the level of abstraction grew. Okay, so what can we get from that? Well, for starters, there is a certain pattern that is repeating itself over and over. I think the Gartner Hype Cycle represents it very well. So, in my humble opinion, we currently are sitting right at the tip of the peak of inflated expectations. Because after Andrei Karpathy popularized the term in 2025, the term of vibe coding, software for vibe coding exploded dramatically. Cursor, Kilo, Copilot, etc. And now we are in a stage where everyone can be a founder. We rapidly are approaching the Trough of Disillusionment. Companies realize that Vibe generates a huge amount of technical debt, has a bunch of security holes, and impossible to scale. So probably what's gonna happen in the future, we all as one big family will learn that vibe coding is a tool for developers and will not replace developers. It's just a tool again. It is more like at the end of this year, the standard programmer would be some kind of an AI orchestrator who builds at 10x speed but maintains human knowledge so the system won't collapse. So that's what is about the history and some predictions. But let's not stop there. Let's take a look at the modern real data and layoffs and hiring and all that jazz. So here is the Indeed graph of software developers job posting from 2020 to 2026. And what it says is this: for every 100 tech roles in 2020, there are only 69 jobs posting in 2026. So minus 30%, which seems big. And it kind of is, but what does it mean? It means that junior developer role suffers the most. Now, when companies are in a waiting mode, it looks like junior developers are struggling to get a job. Seniors are fine, or maybe mostly okay, but overall demand is lower and competition is higher. What that means in general is that companies are in waiting mode, mostly trying to figure out what the outcome of this AI revolution would be, and not really hiring juniors, since their one senior can make much more with agents right now. So this graph does not paint a necessarily great picture, but this data is very niche specific, so we have to keep that in mind. It is only Indeed, it is only software developer jobs, and only for the US market. Besides, it is very possible that companies need to lay off people because of 2023 overhiring in 2022 and use AI as an excuse. What data is also very interesting is the programming language distribution. Here is the visual. And what's interesting here is the rise of Python and decline of JavaScript and PHP in recent years. As you can see, JavaScript jumps between 2019 and 2021, but then cools down. PHP suffers even bigger collapse in those years. That means that web development is actually stable, but loses its attractiveness because of AI. What's interesting is the rise of Python. From 30%, it rises to almost 60%. And that because of its mass adoption by scientists and, of course, machine learning specialists. Pretty cool, I should say. Another great source of interesting data to complete the picture is Stack Overflow surveys. Here's one about AI tools usage. As you can see, 84% of respondents use AI daily, but positive sentiment for AI tools has decreased for 10%. People start to realize that AI code needs constant supervision and someone needs to take over in complicated situations. People use it for Googling answers and generating synthetic content, documentation and debugging, so it's most of the stuff, but much lower percent of people use it for writing code, and almost no one, except hardcore VibeCoders, I guess, uses it for deployment and reviewing code, which I understand. You have to be very brave to delegate that to AI. And let's take a look at the VibeCoding itself. Most people are not VibeCoding, it's 72%. However, 11% do. And that means the main and only thing, AI cannot replace human being, because if it could, it would have already, and stats would have been much different. Now, what does it tell us? Everything that we saw. Well, the job market has changed, but it's not dead in any sense. Software development is alive, and it is still the future for many. Junior developers struggle a bit, but slowly are getting back. AI helps people and still is absolutely not reliable and needs supervision. What to do for a junior developer? Well, the answer is simple. You have to code by hand and skip vibe coding until you are somewhat fluent in syntax and the basics. Because if you will vibe code from the beginning, you will lose the great ability to learn and memorize the absolute essence of the code. But once you master the base, embed AI in your working process. Also, add to your resume words like RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, or agentic workflows, learn vector databases, and put emphasis on your efficiency in your resume than just the skill list. So what to say in the conclusion? Well, we probably are on the peak of inflated expectations and are about to slide down into the trough of despair. On top of that, the economy is cooling off and companies are not hiring at the level of 2022 and 2023, so the conclusion is simple. It is a very good time to become a software developer because the economy and hiring is not dead. It's just a bit slower than the pre-pandemic levels, and it is stable. So on top of that, companies are about to realize that AI will not actually replace people, but will create more jobs and more positions. Plus, you still need a person to supervise AI, right? In my opinion, 2026 will be a very good year for software developers. Anyway, that's all for today. Stay tuned and good luck.